My son abandoned me on a lonely Georgia highway because I refused to erase the $95,000 he owed me. At 72, I stood outside that gas station clutching a bag of candy for my grandchildren, my heart shattering as I realized my own flesh and blood had used his children as weapons against their grandfather. 6 months earlier, I had been their savior. I liquidated my retirement savings and my late wife's life insurance, everything I had built over 40 years, just to keep a roof over their heads. But as their SUV disappeared into the darkness, I swore through my tears the man they left behind would become the nightmare they never escaped. What would you do if your family left you stranded? Let us know where you're watching this from and how you'd handle such a betrayal. I stood outside the gas station on Interstate 75 in the Georgia mountains, staring at the empty parking space where my son's SUV had been just minutes before. The summer evening air felt thick and humid against my skin, but inside I felt cold. 72 years old, and I was stranded on the side of a highway 300 miles from home. The fluorescent lights from the convenience store cast harsh shadows across the asphalt, and the distant hum of traffic on the interstate seemed to mock the silence where my family's laughter should have been. David's black Chevy Tahoe was gone. Jennifer was gone. My grandchildren, 12-year-old Sophia and 9-year-old Mason, were gone. I replayed the last few minutes in my head, trying to make sense of what had just happened. We had been driving from Tampa to Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, for what was supposed to be a magical weekend at Dollywood. My treat. My idea. My money paying for everything because I wanted to create memories with my grandchildren before I got too old to enjoy them. "We'll wait in the car, Dad," David had said when we pulled into this remote gas station. "Just grab some snacks for the kids and maybe some coffee for the road." I had been so focused on being the perfect grandfather, thinking about which candy Sophia liked best, and whether Mason would want chips or crackers. I had taken my time in the store, chatting briefly with the young man behind the counter about the weather and the traffic ahead. Maybe 10 minutes, 15 at most. Now I stood here with a plastic bag full of snacks that no one would eat, watching the taillights of other cars disappear into the darkness, none of them carrying my family. My hands shook as I pulled out my cell phone, 1 bar of service. I tried calling David's number, but it went straight to voicemail. Then Jennifer's, same thing. The reality of my situation began to sink in like cold water filling my lungs. They had left me here, deliberately. My own son had driven away with my grandchildren, leaving their grandfather stranded at a gas station in the middle of nowhere. The same son I had raised, supported through college, helped with his first house down payment, and just 6 months ago had bailed out of financial ruin with $95,000 from my retirement savings. A young man emerged from the convenience store, probably in his mid-20s, wearing a name tag that read Jake. He had kind eyes and the sort of genuine concern that reminded me there were still good people in this world. "Sir, are you okay?" he asked, approaching me cautiously. "You look like you might need some help. I saw you standing out here for a while now." I looked at this stranger, this young man who was showing me more kindness in 30 seconds than my own family had shown me in months, and I felt something crack inside my chest. Not break, but crack, like the first fissure in ice that's about to shatter completely. "My family," I said, my voice hoarse with disbelief. "They left me here." Jake's expression shifted from concern to outrage. "They what, like abandoned you?" I nodded, unable to trust my voice with more words. "That's messed up," Jake said, shaking his head. "Hold on, let me see what I can do to help." "My family left me here," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "They drove away and left me stranded." Jake's face immediately shifted from concern to outrage. His young features hardened with the kind of righteous anger that reminded me there were still decent people in this world. "What do you mean they left you? Like they forgot you were in the bathroom or something?" I shook my head slowly, the reality of it still sinking in. "No, Jake, they didn't forget me. They abandoned me. Deliberately." "That's insane," Jake said, running a hand through his hair. "Who does that? Who leaves their own family member at a gas station in the middle of nowhere?" I looked at this young man, probably no older than 25, showing me more genuine concern than my own son had demonstrated in months. Something about his honest indignation gave me strength. "My son David and his wife Jennifer," I said, "along with my 2 grandchildren, Sophia and Mason. We were supposed to be going to Dollywood together. A family trip. My treat." Jake pulled up a plastic crate from beside the building and sat down facing me. "Sir, I don't understand. Why would they do something like that?" I took a deep breath, feeling the mountain air fill my lungs. For the first time since I had walked out of that convenience store to find an empty parking space, I felt something other than shock. I felt clarity. Jake, can I tell you something? Something that my son and his wife don't know. I'm capable of. Of course, sir. Whatever you need to say. I straightened up in the folding chair, feeling my spine stiffen with resolve. 6 months ago, I gave them $95,000, nearly everything I had saved for retirement. They told me they were going to lose their house, that they needed help desperately. Jake's eyes widened. 95,000? That's a lot of money. It was everything to me, I continued. But here's what they didn't count on Jake. Here's what David and Jennifer don't know about their old man. I paused, letting the moment build feeling power return to my voice for the first time in hours. I'm not just some helpless old fool they can manipulate and discard. I'm not some senile grandfather they can steal from and then throw away when I become inconvenient. Jake leaned forward, completely absorbed. I'm the man who still holds the legal deed to the house they think they own in Atlanta. I'm the man who made sure that $95,000 loan was properly documented with their house as collateral. I'm the man who has been watching them live high on my money while making 0 payments for 6 months. A slow smile spread across Jake's face. You mean you can take their house? I mean, I can force the sale of their house, I corrected. And after tonight, after what they just did to me on this highway, I think it's time they learned that abandoning family comes with consequences. I stood up from the chair, feeling strength return to my 72-year-old bones. Jake, would you mind helping me make a phone call? I think it's time I stopped being the victim in this story and became the one holding all the cards. Sir Jake said, grinning now, let me tell you how I went from roadside victim to the one with all the power. Let me take you back 6 months, I said to Jake, settling back into the folding chair. It was a Tuesday evening in February. I was sitting in my small apartment at Sunset Manor, a retirement community in Tampa, reading a book and enjoying the quiet. Jake nodded, giving me his full attention. I had been living there for 3 years, ever since my wife Margaret passed from cancer. Nice place, but lonely. You know how it is when you're 72 and most of your friends are either dead or in nursing homes. My days were filled with senior center activities, occasional doctor visits, and weekly phone calls with David and his family. I paused, remembering that evening clearly. The phone call that changed everything. The phone rang around 7:30. When I answered, I could immediately tell something was wrong. David was crying. Actually sobbing. In 47 years, I'd maybe heard my son cry 3 times. Once when he broke his arm at age 8, once when his high school girlfriend broke up with him, and once at his mother's funeral. What was wrong? Jake asked softly, and he could barely get the words out. Dad, we're in trouble? We're in real trouble. His voice was breaking with every word. Jennifer lost her job 3 months ago, and we've been trying to keep up with the mortgage and the kids' expenses, but we're behind on everything. The bank is threatening foreclosure. I felt my chest tighten as I remembered the desperation in my son's voice that night. I asked him how bad it was, and he said they needed $95,000 to catch up on missed payments and keep the house. Without it, they would lose everything. Sophia and Mason would have to change schools, leave their friends, start over somewhere else. Jake shook his head sympathetically. That must have been devastating to hear. It was. You have to understand, Jake, those grandchildren are everything to me. After Margaret died, they became my reason for getting up in the morning. Sophia with her beautiful drawings that she would mail to me, Mason with his stories about baseball practice, and his friends at school. I stood up and walked a few steps toward the gas pumps, looking out at the highway where my family had disappeared. David was sobbing into the phone. Dad, I hate asking you this. I know you're on a fixed income, but you're the only person we can turn to. The kids don't know how bad things are. They still believe in Santa Claus and birthday parties, and that their parents can fix anything. So you decided to help them, Jake said. How could I not? This was my son, my grandchildren. I had Margaret's life insurance money sitting in the bank, money I had been saving for emergencies or maybe a nice cruise someday. But what good is money if your family is suffering? I turned back to Jake, feeling the weight of that decision all over again. I told David not to worry, that family takes care of family. I promised him I would figure out how to get the money. How much do you need? I asked, already calculating how much I could access from my savings and Margaret's life insurance policy. $95,000 would cover everything, Dad, David had said quietly. It would catch us up and give us a buffer to get back on our feet. Jennifer is interviewing for jobs, and things will get better. But right now, you're the only person who can save us. I looked at Jake, remembering how my heart had broken for my son that night. "How much do you need?" I asked, already starting to calculate what I could do to save my family. Within 3 days, I had liquidated most of my retirement savings. I continued to Jake. But I wasn't naive. I had learned some hard lessons about lending money to family over the years. Jake leaned forward with interest. Before I transferred a single dollar to David, I called my attorney, Margaret Chen. I told her about David's situation and that I wanted to help, but I needed legal protection. "Smart move," Jake said. Margaret drew up a formal loan agreement. $95,000 to be repaid within 2 years, with David's house in Atlanta as collateral. If he defaulted on payments, I would have the legal right to force the sale of the house to recover my money. I pulled out my wallet and showed Jake a folded piece of paper. I still carry a copy of that agreement. What did David say about the paperwork? He seemed surprised, maybe a little offended. "Dad, we're family," he said. "You don't need legal papers to protect yourself from your own son." But I insisted. I told him it was standard practice, nothing personal. I remembered David's voice getting slightly cold when I mentioned the legal requirements. He signed the papers, though, had them notarized at his bank in Atlanta. "Dad, you're a lifesaver," he said. "We'll have this paid back within a year, maybe sooner once Jennifer finds work." So you wired the money. The very next day, $95,000 transferred from my savings to theirs. Margaret Chen filed the lien paperwork with the county recorder's office. Everything was legal and documented. I paused, feeling the weight of what came next. For the first 2 months, everything seemed fine. David called every Sunday with updates on Jennifer's job search and the kids' activities. Sophia was excelling in art class. Mason made the school baseball team. They sent photos of family dinners and weekend outings. Jake's expression grew serious, but then things changed. Gradually, the Sunday calls became every other Sunday, then once a month. When I did speak to David, he seemed distracted, always cutting conversations short because they were heading out somewhere. I stood up pacing as I remembered the growing distance. Jennifer, who used to chat with me during calls, suddenly was never available. Always busy with something, always just stepping out. That must have been frustrating. I started to feel like I was being managed rather than loved. Every conversation felt scripted, like David was giving me just enough information to keep me satisfied without actually letting me into their lives. I looked at Jake, feeling the hurt all over again. But then the calls became less frequent, and I knew something was definitely wrong. By April, I felt completely cut off from my grandchildren. When I asked to visit for Mason's birthday, David hesitated. "Not a good time, Dad. Jennifer's parents are coming and the house will be too cramped." Jake shook his head. "Excuses. That's all it ever was. Sophia's art show, Jennifer's sister was staying with them. A weekend trip, David was away for work. It felt deliberate, like they were pushing me out. Then in late May, something happened that opened my eyes. I called David's phone, and Sophia answered while he was in the shower. "Grandpa? Michael. I miss you so much. When are you coming to visit? Daddy keeps saying you're too busy, but I want to show you my purple room and my new drawings." Jake's face darkened. "He was lying to the kids about you." That's when I heard David in the background. "Sophia, give me the phone now." He came on out of breath. "Sorry, Dad." She grabbed my phone while I was getting dressed. I asked about what Sophia said. He brushed it off, his kids mixing things up, claimed he was late for a meeting, and hung up. He never called back. That was when I decided to act. If I wasn't welcome for a long visit, I'd surprise them with a short one. I booked a flight to Atlanta, rented a car, and drove to their suburban neighborhood. The whole way, I imagined the joy on my grandchildren's faces when they saw me. Maybe David was just trying to shield me from financial stress. But when I pulled into their driveway, every illusion collapsed. The house looked nothing like a family in crisis. The lawn was immaculately maintained. Parked in the drive was a brand new BMW beside David's truck. Jake let out a low whistle. A BMW. Through the front windows, I saw expensive furniture and a massive flat-screen TV. I rang the bell, and Jennifer called out, "David, can you get that? I'm arranging flowers for tonight's dinner party." Jake's jaw tightened. "A dinner party, while they claim they can't pay you back." David opened the door, face pale. "Dad? What are you doing here?" I told him I'd come to surprise my son and grandchildren. He glanced nervously inside before letting me in. Everything screamed money. Jennifer worked on an elaborate bouquet in a crystal vase. The kids conveniently were both away at birthday parties. Jake muttered, "They're living off your money." I tried suggesting we wait for the kids, maybe have dinner together. Excuse after excuse. After an hour of stiff conversation, it was clear I wasn't welcome. That evening, back at my hotel, I called David. My voice was heavy but steady. I need to know the truth. The confrontation that night didn't go well, I told Jake. When I asked about the new BMW, David became defensive. We never said we weren't going to pay you back, Dad. Just because Jennifer found work doesn't mean we're not still catching up. Jake shook his head, but they hadn't made any payments. Not a single dollar in 6 months. When I pointed that out, David got cold. Dad, I don't like your accusations. We're grateful for your help, but that doesn't give you the right to monitor our spending. I paused, remembering the sting of those words. I flew back to Tampa thinking our relationship might be damaged permanently. But then 3 weeks later, David called with what seemed like an olive branch. What kind of olive branch? Dad, we're planning a family road trip for Labor Day weekend. Dollywood, maybe some hiking through the Smoky Mountains. We thought you might like to join us. I felt a bitter smile cross my face. I was surprised and touched. Maybe they were ready to include me properly again. That sounds wonderful, I said already, imagining spending time with Sophia and Mason at the theme park. You were excited. Great, David said. We'll pick you up Friday morning. Pack light. We'll only be gone 3 days. For the first time in months, I felt hopeful about our relationship. I walked back toward Jake, feeling the weight of my naivety. I spent Thursday evening packing carefully. Comfortable clothes for Dollywood, small gifts for the kids, a sketchbook for Sophia since she loves art, and a new baseball glove for Mason. I even packed homemade cookies for the drive. You were trying to be the perfect grandfather. Friday morning I was ready when David pulled up. Jennifer was in the passenger seat, kids in the back with tablets. Hi, Grandpa Michael, Sophia called out. Are you excited for our adventure? Very excited, sweetheart, I said, settling next to Mason, who gave me a quick hug before returning to his game. My expression darkened as I remembered what came next. The first few hours were pleasant. We chatted about summer activities, Jennifer's job, David's work. The children showed me pictures on their tablets, excited about seeing the mountains. But then things changed. The atmosphere grew tense as we got further from Tampa. David and Jennifer had whispered conversations that stopped when I tried to join in. When I offered to pay for lunch, Jennifer said, That's not necessary, Michael. We can handle our own expenses. Red flag right there. Exactly. They had been perfectly happy to take my $95,000, but suddenly didn't want me paying for a $15 meal. I looked at Jake, feeling the manipulation clearly now. After lunch, the tension in the car became unbearable. The kids sensed something was wrong and became quieter, retreating into their tablets. David and Jennifer continued their whispered conversations while I sat in the back, feeling like an unwelcome stranger. How long did you drive? About 6 hours total. As we entered the Georgia mountains on Interstate 75, David's voice cut through the silence. We need to stop for gas, he announced coldly. I paused, looking out at the very gas station where we now sat. There's a station just ahead, he said, and I could hear something different in his voice, something final. We pulled into this very gas station, I said to Jake, gesturing around us. David parked right there next to pump number 3. As soon as he turned off the engine, he turned to face me with a cold, calculated expression. Jake looked around, imagining the scene. Dad, we need to talk about the loan situation, David said. Jennifer turned around too, and I could see they had rehearsed this. We've been thinking and expecting us to pay back that money isn't realistic. They wanted you to forgive the debt, Jennifer continued. When you loaned us the money, you knew we were struggling. Now that we're back on our feet, we have new expenses. Asking us to pay back $95,000 would put us right back where we started. I felt my chest tighten, remembering their manipulation. David leaned forward. Dad, you don't really need that money, do you? You've got your pension. We're just starting out in life. Is money really more important than your relationship with your son and grandchildren? Using the kids as leverage? Exactly. I looked at Sophia and Mason in the back seat, both sensing the tension. I told them we had a legal agreement that they had promised to repay the loan. What did they say? Jennifer's voice turned icy. That was when we were desperate. We weren't thinking clearly. David, take the kids inside while your father and I finish this conversation. I walked to the exact spot where it happened. David got the kids out. Come on, let's use the restroom and get snacks. Sophia looked confused. Why does Grandpa Michael look upset? Adults are just talking, sweetheart, David said. So they isolated you. Jennifer waited until the kids were inside, then gave me a look of pure calculation. Michael, let me be clear. We are not paying back that money. You can either accept that and remain part of this family, or face the consequences. She was threatening you. I told her I wouldn't be bullied into forgiving $95,000. That's when she said something that chilled me. Fine. Then you can find your own way back to Tampa. Maybe some time alone will help you think about what's really important. I walked back to Jake. I thought she was bluffing. I went into the store to buy snacks for the kids, wanting to show Sophia and Mason that their grandfather still cared about them, even if their parents had lost their minds. But when you came out, I spent maybe 10 minutes inside picking out Sophia's favorite gummy bears and Mason's preferred chips. I even bought coffee for the adults, thinking maybe we could work things out. I looked directly at Jake. When I walked out of that store with a bag full of snacks and hope for reconciliation, the parking space was empty. I watched my son drive away with my grandchildren, leaving their grandfather stranded on a highway in the middle of nowhere. And that's when you showed up, I said to Jake, bringing the story full circle. For several minutes, I just stood there, unable to process what had happened. Then the reality hit me. I was 72 years old, stranded on a mountain highway with no transportation and no way to get home except my cell phone with one bar of service. Jake shook his head in disgust. That's when I came out and saw you standing there looking lost. You were the first person to show me genuine kindness in months, Jake. A complete stranger caring more about my welfare than my own son did. Jake disappeared back into the convenience store and returned with his manager, a middle-aged woman named Carol, who immediately took charge of the situation. Honey, we're going to get you help, Carol said firmly. Jake told me what happened. That's elder abuse, plain and simple. Do you have anyone you can call? I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. My brother Mike lives in Tampa. He's younger than me, only 67, and still drives. Call him, Carol said. Use our landline if your cell service is bad. Mike answered on the second ring. When I explained what had happened, the silence on the other end lasted so long I thought we'd lost connection. Mike, are you there? I'm here, Michael, he said, his voice tight with fury. I'm just trying to process the fact that our nephew abandoned his 72-year-old father on a mountain highway. I'm coming to get you right now. Text me the address of that gas station. While I waited for Mike, Jake brought me sandwiches and kept checking on me. Carol let me use the station's Wi-Fi to access my email and banking apps on my phone. That's when I discovered something that made my blood boil even hotter. Jake, look at this, I said, showing him my phone screen. There are 2 recent charges on my credit card. Charges I didn't make. Jake looked at the screen. $1,200. When were these made? A $700 charge at an electronics store in Atlanta, and a $500 charge at a high-end restaurant. Both made while I was sitting in this gas station, stranded and abandoned. Carol came over to look. Those charges were made today while you were here. David and Jennifer were using my credit card information while I was literally stranded on the side of the road. They had taken my financial information from previous purchases and were spending my money while leaving me here with no way to get home. Jake's face showed pure outrage. That's theft on top of abandonment. I immediately called my bank to report the fraud and had the charges reversed and my card canceled. But the audacity of it stealing from me while leaving me stranded revealed a level of callousness that even I hadn't expected. When Mike arrived 3 hours later, he took one look at my face and pulled me into a fierce hug. My brother was 5 years younger than me, but had always been the fighter in the family. He owned a small construction business and had never married, preferring his independence. Those bastards, he said without preamble as we drove away from the gas station. Michael, I've never liked David, and now I know why. There was always something selfish about that boy. Mike, he's still my son. He's a grown man who abandoned his elderly father on a highway, Mike snapped. Stop making excuses for him. What are you going to do about this? I stared out the window at the mountain scenery that had seemed so beautiful just hours ago when I was anticipating a family vacation. Now it just looked cold and indifferent. I don't know, I admitted. Well, I know, Mike said firmly. You're going to call your lawyer and make them pay for what they've done. You have legal options, Michael. Use them. As we drove through the Georgia mountains toward Tampa, I felt something shift inside me. The shock and hurt were giving way to something harder, more focused. I wasn't going to be a victim anymore. I was going to fight back. The next morning, I called my lawyer, Margaret Chen. I continued to Jake, finishing my story. I told her about the highway abandonment and the credit card fraud. By the time I finished, Margaret was quiet for a long moment. Jake leaned forward, absorbed in the conclusion. Michael, she said finally, this is one of the most clear-cut cases of elder abuse I've ever seen. We're going to make them pay for what they've done. I stood up from the folding chair, feeling the strength that decision had given me. Margaret prepared a legal demand letter that same day. It was delivered to David and Jennifer's house on Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, my phone was ringing nonstop with calls from David that I refused to answer. What did the letter say? It demanded full repayment of the $95,000 loan within 30 days, or I would force the sale of their house. Margaret also included documentation of the credit card fraud and threatened criminal charges. I showed Jake the voicemails David had left. Listen to this progression. First message, Dad, there's been some misunderstanding. Second message, we can work this out without lawyers. By the fifth message, you're being ridiculous. We never said we wouldn't pay you back. Jake shook his head. Panic setting in. Then Jennifer called. Michael, I want to apologize. What happened on the highway wasn't supposed to happen like that. David was just frustrated. I felt grim satisfaction remembering that conversation. I told her, Jennifer, you drove away and left me stranded. You have 30 days to pay the full amount, or the house goes on the market. When she started making excuses about not having $95,000, I said, you should have thought about that before you abandoned me and stole from my credit card. Did they try to negotiate? They tried everything. David called claiming I was destroying the family over money. Jennifer sent texts saying the kids were asking why Grandpa Michael was being mean. They even had Jennifer's mother call me claiming I was being unreasonable. I walked over to the gas pumps looking out at the highway. But I had learned something important during those hours I spent stranded here, Jake. Some people will take your kindness for weakness, your love for stupidity, and your generosity for an invitation to abuse you. So what happened when the 30 days were up? They couldn't pay, of course. All their money was tied up in their luxury lifestyle. BMW payments, house renovations, Jennifer's designer clothes, David's golf club memberships. They had spent my retirement savings on toys while making zero effort to repay the loan. I turned back to Jake with satisfaction. Margaret initiated foreclosure proceedings immediately, under Georgia law, because I held a valid lien, and they had defaulted. The house had to be sold at auction to satisfy the debt. How much did you get back? The house sold for $215,000. After paying off their remaining mortgage and legal fees, I recovered $142,000. That's $47,000 more than I originally loaned them. Jake whistled. Justice served. But the real satisfaction wasn't the money, Jake. It was watching David and Jennifer realize that actions have consequences. They thought they were dealing with a helpless old man who would quietly accept whatever treatment they chose to dish out. I sat back down, feeling the weight of the story. They learned that this 72-year-old man wasn't going to be anyone's victim. When you abandon family, when you steal from people who love you, when you use children as weapons, there are consequences. What happened to Sophia and Mason? That's the hardest part, Jake. The kids are living with Jennifer's parents now, while David and Jennifer try to rebuild their lives. I've reached out to Jennifer's parents, and they've agreed to let me maintain a relationship with my grandchildren. I pulled out my wallet and showed Jake a recent photo. Sophia sent me this drawing last week. It's a picture of her and Mason with their great-grandparents, and there's a figure labeled Grandpa Michael standing beside them. She wrote on the back, I miss you and I love you. Jake smiled at the drawing. She still loves her grandfather. Children are resilient, Jake. They understand love and abandonment better than adults sometimes. Sophia and Mason know that I fought to stay in their lives while their parents chose to drive away from me. I stood up and extended my hand to Jake. Thank you for everything you did for me tonight. You showed me that there are still good people in this world, people who help strangers without expecting anything in return. Jake shook my hand firmly. Mr. Carter, you showed me that it's never too late to stand up for yourself and fight back. As Mike's headlights appeared in the distance, I realized something important. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you can also be the thing that saves you. Being abandoned on this highway had been devastating, but it had also freed me from a toxic relationship and shown me my own strength. I was 72 years old, and I had just learned that I was stronger than I ever imagined. The greatest lesson from Michael's journey is that self-respect isn't selfish, it's essential. When we allow others to exploit our generosity, we're not showing love, we're enabling destruction. God doesn't call us to be doormats for those who would abuse his children, even when those abusers share our blood. These powerful grandpa stories illuminate a truth many elderly face family members who see inheritance before relationship. Michael's transformation from victim to victor proves that the Lord provides strength to those who finally say, enough. His story joins countless other grandpa stories where wisdom triumphs over manipulation, where legal justice serves God's greater purpose of protecting the vulnerable. What distinguishes meaningful grandpa stories from simple tales of family drama is their demonstration of divine timing. God placed Jake at that gas station not by coincidence, but by design. Sometimes our Heavenly Father uses strangers to show us the kindness our own family withholds. Michael discovered that standing up for yourself honors the dignity God gave you. The most inspiring grandpa stories remind us that age brings not weakness, but clarity. Michael saw through David and Jennifer's manipulation because experience taught him to recognize genuine love from calculated exploitation. When we finally align our actions with our worth, miracles happen. This story resonates because we've all faced people who mistake our kindness for weakness. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to demand respect. What's your take on Michael's decision? Drop your thoughts below and don't forget to subscribe for more life-changing stories that prove courage has no expiration date.